Hello class, welcome to week 3 of BUAD 201. This week we will be covering chapters 3 and 4, and we'll also be going into detail for one of your 3 messages that you'll be learning, which is a memo. You'll be learning how to write a memo, a letter, and an email properly. So this week we'll be going over the memo format as well. So your tasks to complete this week are to read chapter 3 and 4 in your textbook, watch this weekly class video lecture. I also want you to complete your week 3 class activity. Remember, this is the activity you're going to be completing during the lecture. And then 4, I want you to complete your chapter 3 and 4 mind tap homework, which is going to be due this Sunday. So please make sure to finish it by then. Just as a refresher, keep in mind that your week 3 class activity is right here. If you click on this link, and then you're going to click on this document, a new one should open in a new window. And this is your week 3 class activity. Go ahead and put your name up here. And then as we continue through the lecture, go ahead and answer your questions for each of your activities right here. So this week's lecture will have 4 activities, just like the previous week. And again, I put my lectures up on titanium as well. Here is the chapter 3 and 4 lecture we'll be reviewing, in addition the memo format lecture as well. So let's go ahead and open up the chapter 3 and 4 lecture. So again, this week we'll be discussing chapter 3 and chapter 4. So go ahead and open up your week 3 class activity document. Remember, it's going to be the Microsoft Word document that I just showed it. Please make sure you save it to computer as you go and answer the questions from the different activities from this video lecture during it. You can go ahead and pause the lecture, complete your activity, and then go ahead and resume it. And once you're complete with it, please upload it to the week 3 class activity link under this week. This is due by the end of the week. So let's talk a little bit about intercultural communication. So growing organizations are expanding into global markets. You have a lot of organizations from the United States looking to go overseas and vice versa as well. So what are some examples? I went ahead and I listed some for you down below. You have KFC, McDonald's, Best Buy, the Home Depot. There's so many companies that are going into overseas markets. So let's take a look at some successful companies and a few unsuccessful companies. So one of the first successful companies I like to talk about is McDonald's. And the thing is with McDonald's, when they decided to go overseas and open up restaurants in other countries, they adapted to what they felt was best for that country. So for example, if you go into McDonald's in the United States, some of you may or may not know that McDonald's serves a cheeseburger called the Quarter Pounder with cheese. It's a quarter pound of meat cheeseburger that you can purchase there. The only problem is in Europe, the metric system is used. Therefore, McDonald's knew that it wouldn't be smart to have a quarter pounder with cheese on their menu because people may look at it and say, well, how much is a quarter pound? I don't know. So what they decided to do was they decided to change the name of it to a McRoyal with cheese. That way the people in Europe didn't have to really worry about understanding how much a quarter pound was. So they were able to adapt to the region that they were going to. Same thing with KFC. The difference is with KFC, they had to learn from their mistakes. Well, KFC decided to open up in China as one of their global moves. And the only issue is when you go into other countries, especially one like China, people from certain countries, they're used to a type of food that they eat. And this type of food has different types of spices. For example, I have a lot of family in Greece, and a lot of the spices that they use are oregano, olive oil, salt, and pepper. So whenever those items are used in something that we're cooking, it reminds me of Greece when I am there and I'm eating the food. Well, in China, KFC opened up and they had their regular recipe, but the problem was the spices that were on their chicken was not the same as what was uh, used to by the people in China. So KFC was hurting quite bad with their profits in China. So what they did was they changed the recipe to reflect more spices used in the Chinese culture. And this actually helped their company grow as Chinese people recognized this place as a place that serves delicious chicken with wonderful recipes. That way their spices are reflective of of where they come from. However, you do have some unsuccessful companies. So, for example, Best Buy in China. So, Best Buy tried to open up in China, and as you may or may not know, some of them are even closing in the United States. But in China, they were not too successful because the consensus in China is you know what you want to buy when you go into a store. Well, Best Buy, it's meant to go in there and you compare products. You go in there and you compare, 20 different brands of televisions or 20 kinds of television. Well, in China, a lot of people they don't like to compare products. Even where I'm from, again in Greece, we don't like to compare products. And when we go into certain stores, we know where they sell that certain product, so we go into that store. So Best Buy did not have a lot of success in China. Home Depot, DIY doesn't exist in certain parts of the country because there's cheap labor there. You have certain countries that it may be cheaper to hire someone to do a job for you than it would be worth your time. Just a few months ago, I decided to do a DIY project at my house where I updated my fireplace mantle, and I went ahead and I put a certain kind of stone on there. Well, it took me about 3 days. It took me Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to complete this. An entire 3 days working probably from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Now, I didn't want to hire anybody because for someone to do this, if even if it would have taken them 2 days, it probably would have cost me about $500-600 just in labor that I saved. However, when you go to other countries where labor is very, very cheap, it's super cheap, people like myself, they will say, you know what, I'll pay for that cheap labor for someone to do it because now I don't have to waste 3 days of my life. So, depending on what the company is and what they're offering, it may or may not be successful, just like these examples that we went over. So, culture. What is culture? Culture is a complex system of values, traits, morals, and customs shared by a society. The definition your book has is a powerful operating force that molds the way we think, behave, and communicate. Now, we all have a different kind of culture. We all grew up in a different environment. There's a complex system of values that we share with people around us. Now, verbal and nonverbal comprehending is difficult because across different culture, you're going to have a different type of verbal and nonverbal communication. Culture can also be learned, which is the good thing. Just because we're not exposed to a certain type of culture doesn't necessarily mean that we can't learn it. So I want to take a look at a video. This is going to be for your class activity one. We're going to go ahead and watch a video, and during this video, I want you to take note. I want to go over what your activity is before we watch the video, so that way you know what to look for during the video. So I want you to watch the following video with the class as it shows a cultural communication example between American and Japanese cultures. Your activity, I want you to write one paragraph on how you perceive this cultural communication scene. What were some of the difficult things Bill Murray, who I have a photo of him down there at the bottom right, was trying to understand? If he spoke Japanese and understood the culture, how do you think he would have reacted to the director's response in this video? How would the commercial shoot have been? So just to kind of set it up, Bill Murray, who's pictured down here below, he has traveled to Japan to shoot a commercial for a whiskey product. And he is communicating with the producer. The only problem, or excuse me, the director. The only problem is the director of this commercial shoot doesn't speak English and Bill Murray doesn't speak Japanese. But the good thing is they have a translator in place who is from Japan, who understands English and speaks English, and she translates what the director says for Bill Murray and vice versa. So let's go ahead and watch this video.
そしてテーブルの上にはサントリーウイスキーがあります。わかりますね。感情を込めてゆっくりとカメラを見て優しく、そしてあなたの古い友達に会うように言ってください。カサブランカのボギーのように君の瞳に乾杯。サントリータイム。
He wants you to turn, look in camera. Okay?
That's all he said?
Yes. Turn to camera.
All right, does he want me to turn from the right or turn from the left?
彼の方はもう準備ができてます。それでスタートがかかった時にカメラの方に振り向く時に左から振り向けばいいのか右から振り向けばいいのか、その辺のところはいかがなさいましょうかっていうことなんですけれども。
どっちだっていいんだよ。もう出ないんだから、そんなもの時間がないんだよボブさん。だからもう早くあなたもうテンション上げてカメラ見て、カメラ目線でゆっくりと、パッションがカメラ目にはパッションだよ。分かった？
And with intensity. Okay?
Is that everything? I mean, it seemed like he said quite a bit more than that.
あなたの言ってることはウイスキーのことだけじゃないんだから。わかる？古い友達に会うように優しくジェントリーにね、そして心から湧き上がってくるテンション、これ忘れちゃダメだよ。
Like an old friend and into the camera.
Okay.
わかった？あなたはウイスキーを愛してます。It's サントリータイム。OK？
Okay.
OK？ はい、本番！よい！スタート！
For relaxing times, make it Suntory time.
カット！本当に分かってんなんだ、とぼけちゃって。これサントリーの響きだよ。高いんだから、サントリーの中で一番。もっと高級な気持ちでね、日常的なお酒じゃないんだよ。
Could you do it slower?
最高な気持ちで。
More intensity.
サントリータイム。本番！よい！スタート！
For relaxing times, make it Suntory time.
カット！
Alright, so now that we've gone ahead and watched that video, go ahead and complete your first activity and write one paragraph on how you perceive this cultural communication scene. You know, what were some of the difficult things Bill Murray was trying to understand? If he spoke Japanese and understood the culture, how do you think he would have reacted to the director's response? How would the commercial shoot have gone? So go ahead and take 10 minutes to complete this activity. If you need more time, that's fine as well. Just go ahead and pause this lecture and then go ahead and continue once you're done. So let's move on to the next slide and discuss a little bit how culture combines visible and invisible. So the way we act is the most visible part of our culture. You know, this is the words, the body language, and gestures that we use that people can actually see. This is the visible part of our culture. Now, under the surface, there are some unspoken rules. So determined by our beliefs, values, attitudes, and biases, feelings and fears and upbringing, this is going to be different. Under the surface, these are things that we grew up with in our culture that may be different among other people. And we'll look at a figure which discusses it, which is figure 3.3, which is in section 3-2A of the online textbook. And you'll see that the invisible outnumber the visible. So kind of think of an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is a visible culture. This is what we can see: the dress, the words, the gestures, the body language, the outward behavior. And as with an iceberg, only a small portion of our culture is visible. Now, the invisible culture, this is under the surface of the water. These are things you can't see. These are beliefs and values, our feelings and fears, our attitudes and biases, our upbringing. This is our type of culture that we don't show, that people don't understand. So let's look at feelings and fears. Controlling reactions to strangers, disease, death, personal space, cleanliness, and pain. So let's take a look at a few things. In some cultures, death is looked at something scary, something we don't want to think about, something that we don't want to happen, that we don't even want to talk about it. Whereas in some cultures, you're going to look at it and it's something beautiful, something that they accept because it's a part of life, and they embrace it as part of their culture. That when an elderly person has led a full life and they pass away, this is something that they can celebrate out of their life. So depending on what our culture is and how we look at things, these feelings and fears are different. So for your class activity 2, so figure 3.3, which we just went over in section 3-2A of your book, shows how culture combines the visible and invisible. This is important in business writing because you may be communicating with people who come from a different culture than your own. So for this activity, write less than one paragraph discussing one of the invisible cultures listed in figure 3.3. The invisible cultures are what is underneath the water, the iceberg. Which one did you choose? What is it? How does a person from a different culture of your own compare to this? Discuss how this invisible culture plays a role in your own culture. So go ahead and take 10 minutes to complete this activity. Pause this video lecture, and once you're ready to move on, go ahead and hit play. So let's take a look at successful nonverbal intercultural communication. So nonverbal skills in another culture, they can be difficult to learn. This is something such as eye contact, facial expressions, postures, and gestures. This is kind of like what people can see but don't understand in a sense. So maybe in my culture, making eye contact while someone is speaking is a sign of respect, and it shows that I'm paying attention to you. Whereas in another culture, if you make too much eye contact, maybe that person may think that you're questioning them. So nonverbal skills in another culture are very difficult, very difficult to learn. So, how do nonverbal cues affect communication? So, let's say you're giving a presentation and your boss is at this presentation and your boss raises their eyebrow. Now, is your boss doubting the statement you just said, or is he or she considering it? We don't know, because that nonverbal communication of the eyebrow raise can mean so many different things, especially in other cultures. So deciphering nonverbal communication is definitely difficult in any culture. But the more you interact with people of other cultures, the more you will learn on how to respond to these nonverbal communication cues. A European office layout is a great example, because what people in Europe, what companies in Europe decided to do were to break down the walls, the barriers of the cubicle, and they put desks in an open floor plan. That way, while you're while you're working, you can see other people. You can look to see what they're doing, how they interact. Are they a person who always smiles? Are they a person who never smiles? Maybe if, let's say you work for a company where you have high cubicle walls and you can't see your coworkers, and one of your coworker comes over to you and starts a conversation up with you, but this coworker isn't smiling. So do you start thinking, well, if they aren't smiling, does that mean they want to talk to me? Maybe they're being forced to talk to me, or maybe they just don't want to talk to me. But by them not smiling, you're going to take that in a way of negativity. Whereas in a European office layout, if it's an open floor plan, you can interact with this coworker much more, and you can see that this coworker doesn't smile all the time. So now you're not going to take it personal, because you know that's their personality type. So keep that in mind. So, how technology and social media affect intercultural communication? Well, the good thing about social media is that it bridges the gap between cultures. It allows for quick interaction and for people to be more social. Twitter and Facebook, they offer an opportunity for intercultural communication. You can understand people from other cultures and you can learn about other cultures through social media. So, social media has definitely bridged the gap between cultures. Global business and social media use. Businesses are building relationships on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Even global businesses in other countries. Think about some examples of global business and social media use. There are companies, in vacation spots overseas or in the Caribbean that are advertising to you in America through the use of social media. They were able to track that you Google searched, Caribbean vacation. So I'm a Caribbean hotel owner in, let's say, Aruba, and I get this information. Well, I'm going to advertise to you that, hey, I have a special going on right now. So social media has definitely bridged the gap between cultures. So let's take a look at understanding the communication process. So the communication process, there's 5 steps. The first step is the sender has an idea. This is where the sender is thinking about something and they start clarifying the idea, they decide on the purpose of the idea, and they start analyzing a little bit more. Then the sender encodes the message. The sender should consider receiver's background, their communication skills, their experience, culture, and context. This is almost like you're looking at your audience. Am I sending an email to my boss, to a coworker, to a friend, to a family member? This is where I start to decide this kind of information. And then in the third step, the sender selects the channel and transmits the message. Consider the importance of the message. Feedback required in understanding. If I'm sending an email to my boss and I need my boss to take a look at something and approve it. Well, if I need my boss to give me feedback or whether to approve the job, I'm going to say that in the email. These are things that you're going to need to look at when you're sending a message. And then step 4, the receiver decodes the message. This is when the person who's receiving the message, they read it and they try to understand it. And this is where you want to ignore any kind of distraction. Expect to learn from the message you're trying to receive. And then 5, feedback returns to sender. The receiver should craft a clear and complete response that reveals comprehension of the message. When you're having a conversation with someone, you ask that person a question, they're going to think about it and they're going to send you their answer back. So this is figure 4.3 in your online book, which is the communication process. Make sure you understand this communication process because when you're completing your writing activities, this is something you're going to need to apply. But there are barriers that can create misunderstanding. There's 4 different types: bypassing, differing frames of reference, lack of language skill, and distraction. So bypassing, what is that? You miss each other with a word's meaning. So let's say you're having a conversation with your boss and your boss asks you for your help. And your boss says, hey, can you help me out with a mailer? Come in tomorrow and help me out. And you assume you're going to help a little bit, maybe give your boss an idea. But when you show up to work the next day, your boss says to you, okay, thanks for coming to help me. Go and complete the entire mailer. So the whole bypassing, you miss the meaning of your boss asking you for help. In your boss's eyes, the boss was looking at you and saying they want you to do it, but in your eyes, you were thinking you're going to do a small part. Differing frames of reference. We all have our own individual frames of reference. For example, negotiations between an American and international company. So let's say negotiations were going back and forth for quite some time. Americans may be upset because the negotiations took too long, or an international company may be happy that the negotiations took a long time because you were able to build a relationship with Americans. So you have two different perspectives on the negotiation process. One side was upset that it took too long. One side was happy that it went long because you were able to build a relationship. Lack of language skill. Different languages between people can increase confusion between them. Distractions. Shaping intelligent messages can be a distraction if one is emotional. If This is why people say that whenever you receive a message and you're going to respond to it, if you're emotional about it, it may be good to sleep on it for one night, to think about it. So for your class activity number 3, miscommunication can occur quite a bit in any professional organization. However, if you prepare yourself with understanding the different types of miscommunication, you can help increase awareness so it does not happen again. So for your activity, in 3 to 4 sentences, discuss an example of when there was miscommunication between you and a friend, a family, or a coworker. Why did this miscommunication happen? Could it have been prevented? If no, why not? If yes, explain. So take about 10 minutes to complete this class activity. Once you begin, go ahead and pause this video lecture. And once you're complete, go ahead and resume and hit the play button. So I want to talk a little bit about using the 3x3 writing process as a guide. So there's 3 steps in the writing process. There's pre-writing, there's drafting, and there's revising. And we're going to talk a little bit about these more in detail as we go. But let's kind of take an overview of them, take a look at them. So step 1, pre-writing. This is where you analyze, what is your purpose? What is it that you want to write about? What is it that you want the receiver to do or to believe? This is when you start thinking of your ideas, Anticipate the profile audience. What does the receiver already know that you don't have to repeat? Will the receiver's response be neutral, positive, or negative? You need to anticipate what it is that the receiver is going to get out of this message. And of course, adapt. What techniques can you use to adapt your message to its audience? Step 2 is drafting. This is when you research. This is where you gather data to provide facts. Search company files. What do you need to know to write this message? How much does the audience already know? Then you organize. Organize direct messages with the big idea first, followed by an explanation in the body and an action request in the closing. For persuasive or negative messages, use an indirect problem-solving strategy. So when you write a direct message, you're going to use the information that you want to present in the beginning, and then you're going to provide details after. Whereas if you're trying to persuade someone, or if you're writing a negative message, this is where you're going to want to use the indirect approach. You're going to use credibility before you give bad news or before you try to persuade someone of something. And then, of course, you're going to draft the message. Usually prepare a first draft and then focus on how you can be more short, concise, and clear. And then step 3, revising. This is where you edit your message. Edit it to make sure it's clear. You don't have any mistakes. Proofread, read through it a couple times, look for errors, and then evaluate. Will this message achieve your purpose? Does the tone sound pleasant and rather friendly, So class activity number 4. The 3x3 writing process can help you organize your ideas and formatting of a writing document. And for your activity, in 3 to 4 sentences, pick one of the 3 different steps of the 3x3 writing process and describe why you think this process is important. Try to include some examples to back up your reasoning and provide a link between your examples and reasoning. So take about 10 minutes to complete this activity. Once you are done, go ahead and upload it to the week 3 class activity assignment right here. And once you're done, go ahead and prepare yourself if you want to get any notes out to start writing. And we're going to go ahead and begin the memo format lecture. So I want to talk a little bit about the memo format. The memo format is one of the 3 different types of formats that you're going to learn to write about. You're going to have a memo, a letter, and an email format you're going to learn in this class. So let's take a look at the memo format. So memos are documents that use standard form. It has a to section, a from section, a date section, and a subject section. It can be sent on paper or even as an attachment in an email. And it can be used for routine correspondence. So when I worked at a .com, I was the marketing manager, and I would come in pretty early. And sometimes when I'd come in early, I'd have a piece of paper laying down on my desk. And this was a memo from the HR department. And the HR department would go around and put a memo on people's desks to let them know about something. For example, one time the HR department needed to let us know that they were resurfacing the parking structure and the parking lot. They were retarring it. So they provided us a memo about this information, and in this memo, it showed us other places that we could park. So a memo can be on a paper format, or it can even be sent as an email. Sometimes I used to receive emails from my boss to the whole marketing department that would say "See memo attached," and when you'd open up the Word document attached to the email, it was a memo explaining, maybe something that we were moving forward with as a marketing department. So you can use them on paper or even as an attachment in an email. So the memo format's figure 11.4 in your book. It's in section 11-1B. It shows a typical memo format. Now, it does not have to have this exact same format with certain headers of recommendations, findings, and analysis, but it needs to give informational support. So let's look at the next slide, and then I'll come back to this slide. So here's what the memo format looks like. You have the date at the top, then you have to, from, subject, then you have a small opening paragraph that discusses what this memo is going to be about, and then underneath here they provided some recommendations, and then finding and analysis here. So this is what the memo format looks like. You don't have a signature at the bottom here because here it shows who it's from. So let's look at that example that I told you about with my HR department when I used to work for the .com, sending out a memo about how they're resurfacing the parking lot. So at the top they would have the date. To, it would say all employees. From, it would say human resources department. Subject, it would say resurfacing of parking lot. And in this first paragraph, it would say something along the lines like, we would like to inform you we will be resurfacing the parking lot, and we will be painting brand new lines, and this process will take place over the next 3 weeks. Below you will find information that you will need to know. And then maybe this title here would say process of resurfacing. And you may explain here about what the process would be like of resurfacing the parking lot. The parking lot will take about 3 weeks to complete. The first stage would be tearing up the old tar. The second stage would be adding in the new tar. The third stage would be repainting the lines. And when we do repaint the lines of the parking lot, we're going to add in 3 more handicap spaces, and we're also going to be adding in 4 parking spots for 30-minute parking. And then here it may say additional places to park, and it may include a list of additional places, maybe next door, maybe the company took out a temporary lease on a parking structure down the street that you can park at. So a memo is going to be more of an informational type of report. So you separate the information in a memo with the proper headers as shown. So example here shows the recommendations and then the finding and analysis. So here you have your recommendations and then you have your finding and analysis. And you could click here. There's an example here from al.english.purdue.edu. This is a very good website, and it gives you a sample memo format as well too here. And a memo is usually going to be about 1 page long. So play around here, and you can review, parts of a memo. You can review the format. Take some time to take a look at this here. So here's a memo format activity. This isn't anything you need to turn in or anything that's going to be due, but this is something that's going to give you an idea of how to write a memo. So open a new Word document and save it to your computer. This new document will be your first memo, so be sure to use the tools listed in the book in section 11-1B. So the situation, you work in a human resources department at the corporate office for Bloomingdale's department stores. The company has noticed employees are using their employee discount to buy items and resell them to others. This needs to come to a stop because an employee can be terminated for completing such actions. So, activity: write an inner office memo, 1 page long, to the department managers of all Bloomingdale's stores discussing the new policy which will take place. The new policy will include the following: an employee will receive 25% off 3 items in 1 calendar year. All other items will receive 15% off, but can only have a total of 30 items in 1 year. An employee caught reselling an item will be terminated immediately. Employees must have their manager ring out their purchase, so employees can't do it themselves. So here are some example headers to separate in this memo. Maybe you can use recommendations, new employee policies, results of caught. Be creative and have fun. So let's take a quick look. So remember, a memo format. Let's take a look at what it looked like. So here at the top you have the company name. So we can put, or I'm sorry, it was Nordstrom's. And you can even put here inner office memo. Or it was Bloomingdale's, forgive me. So let's make this a little larger. We can even italicize this if you'd like. And then you have to, from. We also have date and subject. Date will go first. Oops. And then subject. So today's date is September 5th, 2017. And we're going to make sure it is all even. We're going to say to all employees, excuse me, actually you're setting this to department managers because they need to reiterate this to their employees. So you work as a human resources, you work in the human resources department. So we're going to put here human resources. And then subject, we can maybe call this new employee purchasing policies. So in the first paragraph, what we may want to write about is what the situation is. So the company has noticed employees are using employee discount to buy items. So you can even put something along the lines like this here. Please do not copy and paste information from an actual case study, but you would write something along these lines right here. So you can say, Bloomingdale's has noticed ... that employees are using their employee discount to buy items and resell them to others. You know, this information, this needs to come to a stop. As a department manager, you know, please reiterate this information to your new employees. So I'll just put text here so you can kind of see what the formatting will look like. So now let's go back and take a look what exactly we need to write. So we need to discuss a new policy that will take place. So, new policy. We'll bold that title. And you will put these different policies here. So maybe we're gonna, let's bullet point them. So first, new policy. We don't want to bold the type that we're writing right now, only the headers. Second new policy, third new policy. And then maybe at the end you can discuss how employees must have their manager ring out their purchase, and employees caught reselling an item will what it will result with. So we can put here results to employees. Oops, employees. So you can discuss here if employees are caught breaking the rules, ... and you explain here what's going to happen when they are caught. And it will look something like this. And then even at the beginning of the new policy, you can even have an introduction here explaining what the new policy is going to entail and why it's in place. And then you have a results here as well. So you can kind of see this is what the formatting is going to look like of your memo format. So practice it. Try this memo format activity yourself if you would like to. This will give you good practice. So I have the PowerPoint for week 3 and 4 right here. And then I also have the memo format lecture as here as well too. So if you'd like to download the PowerPoints, you can as well. So again, remember, please complete your week 3 class activity. This is going to be due at the end of the week. And then in addition, your week 3 and 4 MindTap homework assignments will be due as well too. Let's take a look where that is going to be. Cengage login. So when you log into Cengage, it's going to look like this. So at the end of this week, you have chapters 3 and chapters 4. So let's go ahead and do chapter 3 first. You click on chapter 3 here. And then you have your chapter 3 assignment. And you click on this and you complete your assignment here. And you're going to do that for chapters 3 and chapters 4 by the end of this week on Sunday. So if you have any questions, please email me. You could call me. You can even text me. All my contact information, again, as a reminder, is up here. I have my mobile phone number here if you'd like to call me to discuss, or you can text me, or you can even shoot me an email. I wish you guys all the best of luck this week. And again, reach out if you have any questions whatsoever.